All right, so we're diving into a big one today. A question I know a lot of you out there have thought about at one point or another. Does having similar backgrounds actually matter when it comes to finding a partner? And more importantly, making that relationship last, like actually go the distance. You sent in some really interesting articles and notes on this,
Mm.
and I'm so ready to get into it.
Yeah.
But I think before we unpack all of that, it might be good to get on the same page about what we even mean by background, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we could be here all day talking about backgrounds and still not really be talking about the same thing. When we talk about like social backgrounds, it's about way more than just where you grew up.
Right. It's not just like, oh, I'm from a small town or I grew up in the city.
Exactly. It's about all the things that shape who you are and how you see the world. Your family dynamics, how they interact, how they communicate, what values were you raised with, even like the kind of education you had. All of that plays a role.
So like two people could both be from big cities but have totally different social backgrounds. Like someone who grew up in a huge family with tons of siblings versus someone who was an only child. I imagine their ideas about like family and relationships could be pretty different.
100%. And then there's the whole economic background thing, which
Yeah.
again is more nuanced than just how much money you make or your current financial situation.
Right. It's like what your relationship with money is like in general.
Exactly. How comfortable are you talking about money? Do you tend to save or spend? Are you anxious about money? These are all patterns that are often rooted in how we grew up and what we learned about money. And they definitely can play a role in
Oh,
relationships.
absolutely. Money is one of those things that can make or break a couple. Okay, so let's get into the heart of it.
Mm.
Why might having similar backgrounds be a good thing for a relationship?
Well, one of the biggest arguments is that it can lead to shared values.
Makes sense.
When you come from similar backgrounds, you're more likely to see eye to eye on big things like how to spend your free time or how you want to raise your kids or even just like what's important in life.
Let's give this built-in understanding of where your partner is coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And that can make communication so much easier
Yeah.
and also just create a sense of harmony. Another big one is financial compatibility.
Okay, yeah, that's huge.
If you both have similar financial habits and goals, you're way less likely to bump heads over money.
If one person's a saver and the other is a spender, that could cause some serious tension.
For sure. And money arguments are one of the top reasons couples fight.
So having that shared understanding of money can be a real asset.
Absolutely. And then there's also the whole support system thing.
Yeah, like friends and family,
Exactly. When you come from similar backgrounds, you often have overlapping social circles, which can be a huge source of support for your relationship.
especially when things get tough.
Yeah, like if you're going through a job loss or a family crisis, having that network of people who know and love both of you can make all the difference.
It's like having a built-in cheerleading squad. Okay, so there's some pretty solid arguments for why similar backgrounds could be beneficial. But here's where things get really interesting. What about the other side of the coin?
You mean the idea that maybe differences in background can actually be a good thing?
Exactly.
Well, there's a lot of research that suggests just that. When you come from different worlds, you each bring unique perspectives and experiences to the relationship.
Like it broadens your horizons in a way.
Yeah, exactly. You're constantly learning from each other, challenging each other's assumptions, and growing as individuals.
Instead of just mirroring each other.
Right, and that constant exposure to different viewpoints can actually make your relationship more resilient in the long run.
How so?
Well, when you have to navigate differences, you learn how to compromise, how to communicate effectively, and how to see things from multiple perspectives. Those are all essential skills for any relationship.
So it's like a crash course in adaptability.
Exactly. And on top of all that, there's also something really beautiful about relationships that bridge social and economic divides.
Like it challenges societal norms.
Exactly. It shows that love can transcend those boundaries, and it contributes to a more inclusive and understanding world.
There was one story in the research that really stuck with me about a couple who came from completely different economic backgrounds.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, one partner grew up in a wealthy family and the other had to struggle financially for years. And they talked about how those differences actually made their relationship stronger.
That's so powerful because it shows that true compatibility goes beyond surface level similarities. It's about that willingness to understand and embrace each other's experiences.
Okay, so we've got strong arguments for both sides. Shared backgrounds can create a sense of harmony and understanding, but differences can lead to growth and resilience. So where does that leave us?
Well, I think instead of focusing on finding the right background, it's more about understanding what truly matters in any relationship.
Regardless of where people come from.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing communication is at the top of that list.
Without a doubt, open and honest communication is crucial for any couple, but it becomes even more vital when you're navigating differences in background.
It's how you bridge those gaps and build understanding.
Right. And then there's compatibility, which again is about more than just shared backgrounds.
So it's less about checking boxes and more about a deeper connection based on shared values and goals.
Exactly. And a willingness to grow together.
Okay, so we've explored the why, but what about the how? What can couples actually do to navigate these differences in a healthy way?
I'm glad you asked, because the research you sent over has some really great advice on that.
I'm all ears.
One of the most important things couples can do is to proactively learn about each other's backgrounds.
And I don't just mean like the basic facts, right?
Yeah. No, not just like, oh, this is where I grew up, this is what my parents do. It's about asking thoughtful questions, listening with genuine curiosity, and trying to really understand how your partner's experiences have shaped who they are today.
It's about recognizing that their background isn't just some abstract concept. It's an integral part of who they are.
Exactly. And this process of learning and understanding shouldn't be a one-time conversation. It needs to be an ongoing dialogue as your relationship evolves.
Okay, so active learning is key. What else?
When it comes to economic backgrounds, transparency is key. Have those open and honest conversations about finances early on.
When we're talking really open.
Yes, like lay it all out there. Your financial goals, your spending habits, any debts you have, any anxieties or insecurities you might have about money.
It could be uncomfortable.
It can be, but it's so important to be on the same page, especially if you come from different financial situations.
So you can work together to create a shared financial vision.
Exactly. And practical things like creating a budget together can be incredibly helpful.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about understanding and bridging differences, but I'm guessing it's equally important to remember that those differences aren't inherently bad.
Absolutely. In fact, they can be a source of strength and richness in your relationship.
Instead, seeing them as obstacles.
Right. Try to celebrate them as unique contributions to your partnership.
So like if your partner comes from a culture that celebrates certain traditions you're unfamiliar with, be open to embracing those traditions.
Exactly. And if they have a different way of expressing affection because of their upbringing, learn to appreciate that.
It's about recognizing that diversity of thought and experience can actually make your relationship more vibrant and fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. What do you think is more important for a thriving relationship? Shared backgrounds, or the willingness to bridge the differences?
That's a great question. And I think ultimately the answer will be different for every couple.
But by exploring these different perspectives, you're already on the path to building a more conscious and fulfilling relationship, no matter what your backgrounds might be. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig into some real-life examples of couples who have made it work, both with and without similar backgrounds.
You know, as we were talking about embracing differences, I kept thinking back to that couple from your notes, the one where they came from completely different cultures.
Oh yeah, the one where one partner grew up in a very traditional collectivist culture, and the other was from a more individualistic background.
Yeah, exactly. Like talk about a clash of cultures.
And they made it work.
They did,
Yeah.
but it wasn't easy.
So what were some of the challenges they faced?
Well, at first they really struggled with communication.
Makes sense.
They had different ways of expressing themselves, different ways of handling conflict.
And those differences led to misunderstandings.
Oh yeah, lots of them. It was like they were speaking different languages sometimes.
So how did they overcome that?
Well, it started with a lot of patience and a willingness to learn about each other's cultures.
Like really trying to understand where the other person was coming from.
Exactly. They started asking each other questions, not to challenge or judge, but to genuinely learn.
It sounds like they turned their cultural differences into a learning experience.
They did. They learned about each other's family traditions, they explored each other's cultural heritage, and they even started incorporating some of those traditions into their lives as a couple.
That's so cool. It's like
Yeah.
they created their own little cultural melting pot.
I love that. And you know what's really amazing is that this process of understanding and integrating their cultures, it actually strengthened their relationship.
How so?
Well, for one thing, they developed a much deeper appreciation for each other.
Because they took the time to really understand each other.
Exactly. And they also became more adaptable and resilient as a couple.
Because they had to learn how to navigate those differences.
Right. And they learned how to communicate more effectively,
Yeah.
which is essential for any relationship.
This story is so inspiring. It really shows that Differences can be a source of strength.
Absolutely. When you approach them with an open mind and heart.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about culture, but there are so many other dimensions of background that can come into play in a relationship.
Right. It's not just about where you're from or what your cultural traditions are.
It's about your whole life experience.
Exactly. Your education, your religious beliefs, your political views.
All of that shapes who you are.
And it can definitely have an impact on your relationship.
But even with all these different dimensions, the same principles apply.
Communication, empathy, a willingness to learn and grow together.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about checking boxes. It's about finding someone who shares your core values, who inspires you to be your best self, and who's willing to embark on that journey of discovery and growth right alongside you.
Beautifully said. And remember, that journey is ongoing.
It's not a destination.
Right. Relationships evolve, people change, new challenges arise.
So it's about being adaptable.
And being willing to compromise. And always trying to see things from your partner's perspective.
Even when it's different from your own.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of embracing differences. But there's another side to this that I think is really important to address, and it's something that came up in one of the articles you sent. This idea that societal expectations around background compatibility can actually be pretty harmful.
Oh, that's a huge one.
Yeah, like sometimes it feels like society is telling us who we're allowed to love,
And those expectations can be so limiting.
and sometimes even discriminatory.
Absolutely.
Can you give me some examples of how this plays out in real life?
Sure. Think about the pressures some cultures put on people to marry within their own ethnic or religious group.
Yeah, I've seen that.
While it might be framed as preserving tradition, it can also be a way of controlling people's choices and reinforcing existing power structures.
It's like saying your love is only valid if it fits within these narrow parameters.
Exactly. And it can lead to the exclusion and marginalization of people who don't fit those parameters.
And it's not just about ethnicity or religion. We also see societal pressures around economic background,
all the time. There's this idea that you should marry someone from your own social class.
which is so messed up.
It is. It's like your worth as a partner is determined by your bank account.
And these societal expectations can have real consequences,
They can lead to feelings of shame, guilt, fear of judgment,
not to mention internalized bias.
where people start to believe that they're not worthy of love
Yeah.
because of their background.
It's a vicious cycle.
And it's so important to recognize that these societal expectations aren't objective truths.
They're often rooted in prejudice and discrimination.
Exactly.
So it's up to us to challenge those expectations,
And create a more inclusive and accepting world.
where love is celebrated in all its forms.
Absolutely.
This is something I feel really passionate about.
Yeah.
Because I've seen firsthand how these societal pressures can hurt people. So let's all commit to challenging those expectations and creating a world where everyone feels free to love who they love.
I'm with you on that.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the benefits of both shared backgrounds and embracing differences. We've talked about the importance of communication and compatibility. And we've even touched on the harmful societal expectations that can limit our choices.
It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways.
Okay.
First and foremost, remember that every relationship is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all formula for success.
That's so important.
What works for one couple might not work for another. So don't let anyone tell you what your relationship should look like.
Right.
Second, let's all commit to challenging those societal expectations that limit individual choice and perpetuate inequality. Let's create a world where love is celebrated in all its diverse forms.
That's a beautiful goal.
And finally, I encourage everyone to keep exploring this topic. Read books, listen to podcasts, have conversations with friends and family. The more we learn and discuss these issues, the better equipped we'll be to build healthy, fulfilling relationships that honor our differences and our shared humanity.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so that wraps up part 2 of our deep dive, but we're not done yet. In part 3, we're going to explore another fascinating aspect of this topic, the potential pitfalls of focusing too much on similarities. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into whether similar backgrounds actually matter for those long-term relationships. You know, the ones that go the distance. We've explored so many different angles already, but there's one last piece of this puzzle I really want to get to. This idea that maybe focusing too much on similarities could actually be holding us back in the relationship department.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's kind of like a trap almost.
Right, like we get so fixated on finding someone who checks all the same boxes.
Exactly. Same hometown, same religion, same socioeconomic background.
And in doing that, we might be missing out on some really incredible connections.
With people who could push us to grow and see the world in a whole new way.
It's like we're so busy trying to find a mirror image of ourselves that we forget that sometimes the most beautiful reflections come from looking into something different.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good one.
I try.
But yeah, I totally agree. It's like with food, right?
Okay, I'm intrigued.
You might have your go-to dishes, the ones you know you'll always love.
Comfort food.
Exactly. But if you never try anything new, you'll never know what you're missing.
You'll never discover those hidden culinary gems.
Right. And who knows, that new dish might become your new favorite.
So you're saying branching out in relationships could be like trying a new dish. It might surprise you in the best way possible.
Exactly. By being open to partners from different backgrounds, you're opening yourself up to a whole world of new perspectives, new experiences, new ways of seeing the world,
I love that. It's about embracing the unknown.
and being willing to step outside of your comfort zone.
Because you never know where you might find love.
And I think this openness is so important in today's world, where we're constantly interacting with people from all walks of life,
It's like a crash course in understanding different cultures and perspectives,
which can only make us more well-rounded individuals.
and hopefully lead to a more compassionate and understanding world.
That's the dream.
So despite all the complexities of relationships and the different factors that come into play, there's something really hopeful about all of this.
What's that?
This idea that we can choose to be open, we can choose to embrace differences, and we can choose to create relationships that are truly unique and fulfilling.
You're so right. It's empowering.
It is.
And it reminds me that at the end of the day, building a strong relationship isn't about finding someone who's exactly like you,
It's about finding someone who compliments you
who challenges you, who supports you on your journey.
and who helps you grow into the best version of yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into whether similar backgrounds matter in relationships. It's been such a fascinating conversation,
It has.
and I hope it's given you all some food for thought. Remember, there's no one right answer. Every relationship is unique, and what matters most is finding what works for you and your partner. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep those conversations going. Keep challenging those assumptions, and keep celebrating the beautiful complexity of love in all its forms.